This is a demo of Micro Focus's AD Bridge product, which allows you to join your Linux and Unix endpoints directly onto your Active Directory domain, which allows you to take advantage of things like group policy. Let's take a look at how to install the AD Bridge agent directly onto your Linux server and be able to take advantage of the control and configuration that group policy gives you. What this is doing is it's authenticating to your Active Directory domain and then joining your Linux server to Active Directory. Now let's take a look at the AD users and computers. Right now, your Linux server does not show up, but if we do a refresh on the computer object, you'll see that the new computer that we joined will show up. And here's my computer that we just joined to the Active Directory domain. Now that it's joined as an object, computer object inside of Active Directory, I can actually configure group policy objects that target that endpoint and be able to configure settings directly onto the Linux server. What we're going to do is change one of the firewall settings. Right now, this firewall setting blocks any attempts to SSH directly into this Linux server. We can see when we try doing a PuTTY directly in, that SSH capability is denied. So what I want to do is change the group policy setting so that I can actually PuTTY into and do an SSH directly into this machine. So I'll go ahead and select the Allow button and change this setting, save it back to the group policy object, which will then apply down to the Linux server that this was assigned to. Now that it's applied, I can actually go back in and try doing an SSH back into the server. And now the SSH capability is allowed through the firewall setting because we've been able to apply through group policy the change in the firewall settings. Now let's take a look at the SSH config file that's inside this Linux server. What this shows is a basic empty SSH config file. What I want to do is via group policy, be able to take a template SSH config.sys file and be able to assign it directly to the machine. I'm creating a new group policy object, editing that group policy object, and being able to go in and deploy this new SSH config template file. Let me go back and take a look at a template file that I've created previously. So this SSH config file has a bunch of settings already inside, including the allow root override. What I'm going to do is assign that SSH config file, create a setting called SSH config, pull that template SSH config file directly into the group policy object, and assign that to the etc SSH directory. What that will do is when this group policy object gets applied, it will actually take that template SSH config.sys file and be able to deploy it to every machine this group policy object is targeted to. Now let's take a look and make sure that the group policy is applied again to this machine. As you can see, as the group policy logs go through, it shows that the SSH config file is actually being pulled down and applied to this server. Let's take a look at the actual config file itself. And you can see that the settings that we had set in the template file has now been applied to this server. What this does is it really allows you to configure and manage and persist configuration settings in any number of Linux or Unix machines, and all controlled through the centralized mechanism of Active Directory and group policy.